Hey folks, welcome back to the Offgrid workshop. This video is something a little bit different to what we usually put out because I'm actually currently on a trip. We're on like a 14-day trip to Scotland and we are about as remote and far from home as we can get. Currently where we sit now, we're on a campsite called Glen Brittle campsite on the Isle of Skye. And this is about 565 miles from home. So within the UK, it's probably about as far away from home as I can get. And we've run into a problem. Essentially, our alternator has died a death and stopped charging completely, getting absolutely nothing out of it. Now, I realized this yesterday because while we were traveling yesterday, I just knew that something had changed, that there was a different sound coming from the engine or from the vehicle as it runs. And I knew that something was up. So started looking into what was going on, realized my Orion XS was not getting anything from the alternator, so it wasn't charging the leisure battery, and also noticed that the engine battery voltage was dropping as we were driving, just from running the cab and the lights and stuff like that. And so since we got to this campsite yesterday, I climbed underneath and had a look, checked that the belt of the alternator was still there. All of that's still intact, it's still spinning. So obviously, the alternator is not actually outputting anything to the engine battery and then therefore to the leisure system either. So what I'm going to do with this video is just to document how we actually get home, show you what I'm doing. I would caution this with, I know a lot about this vehicle and these systems to be confident in what I'm doing, to not cause any damage to my leisure system, to the lithium batteries and things like that. And likewise to the engine and not do anything that's sort of dangerous. So I would just caution you, if you do run into a problem like this, unless you know what you're doing, get somebody to help, call recovery, that sort of thing. So yeah, we're going to go through a few things and we'll keep you updated with how we get home. So here's what we've got going on in here. So I've jerry-rigged a jump lead on the feed over there, which is what my Orions take off from the engine battery. And then I've taken it off a bus bar here. And so this is just so that I can power the cab from my leisure system, which is obviously charged by solar while we drive. So we're going to give this a go and see how we get on with that. I disconnect this when I start because obviously I don't want to be drawing that high amperage through the system from the leisure system. And the engine battery is holding enough just to start the battery just by trickle charging from the multi-plus when the engine's off. Thought I'd show you what it looks like. So I've just started the engine and then connected the jump lead so that the engine is being topped up by the leisure system, or the starter battery is being topped up by the leisure system as the engine's running. And so it's currently pulling about 12 amps, as you can see there from the shunt, pulling just over 12 amps, and that's just sort of charging the engine battery, so to speak, as we have the van idling here. And that rate fluctuates, obviously. If I have lights on, like the van's headlights on, obviously that draws a reasonable amount of power. And then also what I've noticed as well is, depending on the temperature, and I think this probably has something to do with the radiator fan maybe kicking in, it fluctuates as to how much power is being drawn by the engine. And also what speed I drive seems to change that as well. So, but this is about average, sort of around 10 amps or thereabouts, and that's just stuff that the van is using just to sort of run things, all the electrics that keep this thing going. So yeah, that's kind of an insight into that. So as long as we sort of get enough solar just to produce that, then we should be able to maintain the voltage on the battery and the state of charge. But yeah, that gives you an idea of how much power is actually being drawn by the engine system from the leisure battery just to keep things running. All right, first hour of the drive back, and we've stopped at Kyle of Lakelsh. Please forgive me if I butchered that name. But right as you get to the bridge that goes over to Skye, stopped off at the place that does this fish and chips, which I wanted to highlight. So these guys are gluten-free and they even cater for celiac, which is awesome. And it's a really good fish and chips. It's called Fisherman's Kitchen, I believe it is. And so we're enjoying fish and chips with a beautiful view overlooking the loch here. And here's the power situation. So we left the campsite this morning with about 60% state of charge on our leisure battery. And the combination of solar and just what the engine's used We're down to 57, and the solar's catching up a little bit. Obviously, it's really overcast and rainy today, so getting very little, 75 watts out of the 850 odd that I've got on this fan. But it should help us to be able to limp along. And what I'm doing is disconnecting that jerry-rigged jump lead when I start the engine, so it's not putting that load on the leisure system. And then I connect it up, and then that means that the actual van cab can run on the leisure system while we're driving. So far so good. We've lost sort of 3% of the leisure system just from driving for the last hour. So we'll carry on for another couple of hours this afternoon and update you on how we get on. So we pulled up on the side of Loch Lomond, and here is the status of the power. So we're about a third of the way home. Batteries are still at 57%, and the solar has basically been maintaining it all through the day while we've been powering the cab from the leisure system. So it's good. It's going well. All right, second leg of the trip. This is the state, so 46%. Getting a bit of solar, but we're a little bit sheltered here. And then this is what we do every time just before we leave for a trip, is go out to the electric cupboard and connect up that jump lead. So I'll show you now. So when we stop, I disconnect this so that we don't start the engine off the leisure system and put that strain on the leisure system. So just connect that, and then that keeps the engine battery topped up while we're moving from the solar. And there we have it. Made it back home. Pretty much solar managed to maintain the leisure battery state of charge while we were driving. Had a bit of a more challenging time this morning, just in terms of it being quite overcast and not a lot of solar, but the day cleared up and now it's beautiful. Solar's cranking just as we pulled in, so pretty much been able to maintain the batteries at about 50%. We've been pretty conservative with what we've used though. So glad to have made it back. Like I said previously, it's not ideal doing what we did, but the alternative was staying on the Isle of Skye and getting recovered, or getting back to mainland and getting another alternator or something along those lines. Just putting in a new battery into the engine wouldn't have actually helped, because it would have flattened it pretty quickly. It's amazing how much power these vans use just to run. And what we found actually was yesterday, when the weather was better, solar would be cranking, but the engine would be using a lot more power than when it was cooler in the day. And I think that's mainly probably down to the radiator fan being on pretty much full time or something along those lines. It's the only thing I can put it down to. But yeah, the engine was using a lot more power when it was warmer than it was when it was cooler. So yeah, one point though, just jerry rigging the jump leads like that, wouldn't recommend it to actually start the engine with that unless you're in a real pinch, and also wouldn't recommend leaving it like that unless you have some sort of safety built in and in place. So with the line that comes from my engine battery to the post that I put the jump lead on in my electrical cupboard, there's a fuse on that. So if the one side of the jump lead did come off and started shorting, then I know that that fuse would go. And on the other side, equally, there's a fuse. So from that point of view, it wasn't too risky in terms of using the jump lead like that. It did get us back over Easter weekend to be back home, and now I can sort it out and get the right alternator, and I don't have to be faffing on the side of the road or at a campsite somewhere in remote Scotland. So yeah, pretty pleased that we made it back, and it was an interesting end to the trip. But fortunately, we were able to still enjoy the last few days. I mean, we just took it easy coming back. We didn't rush back just to get back. We just pretty much stuck to our plan. We were just a bit more conservative with how much power we used. So, for example, I had the fridge on gas all the time, whereas previously, when I'm traveling long distance like that, covering ground, I'll run it off the inverter, off the 230 volt, because usually the engine can cope with that. And obviously then we did more cooking on gas than induction and things like that. So just changed it a little bit, but otherwise still managed to get to Lowther Castle up in the north of England, and a few bits and pieces that we wanted to do on our way down. Just took 3 days to get back from Skye. So yeah, all around good trip, and made it back. Now we can get a new alternator and get that sorted out. So thanks for watching, folks, and we'll see you in the next video. Cheers.